G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it.
We'll have all the show notes and any resources mentioned in the cast on our website. After 20 years in corporate law, in 2016, aged 38 and with 3 young kids, started a new type of law firm to disrupt the market. Questioning what value juniors gave to clients when they were being charged to clients to effectively learn on the job, their company only has highly efficient and experienced lawyers with 20 plus years in the game. Mellissa started as a 1 FTE, they're now up to 9, and sales have grown 267% year on year over the 4 years. The business has been funded entirely from profits. They are obsessive about culture, changing theirs to a collaborative one, not competitive amongst colleagues for billable work, putting value for clients front and centre. Felt she had succeeded when they won their first big piece of work, then winning a large old client. Hardest thing about growing a small business is accepting the risks, then making it happen. What Mellissa would tell herself on day one of starting out is, you can do this. Go back and listen to episode 11 and hear how James pivoted from a successful digital agency to back an iPad idea, which is now the #1 selling app in its category, selling more than $30 million a year.
Welcome everyone. Today I'm interviewing Mellissa Larkin from Peripheral Blue in beautiful Adelaide, Australia. Thanks for your time this morning, Mellissa.
Oh, pleasure. Thanks for having me.
We'll start with how we know each other again. Peter, our podcast editor, emailed you to ask if you'd like to come on the cast, so really appreciate you making the time today.
Thanks. No, I'm very, very grateful to be here.
Tell our audience a bit about your business, what it does, how it makes money.
So I founded Peripheral Blue in 2016. It's a legal and consulting business, and we founded it with the aim of disrupting the legal and consulting services industries in Australia.
Great. And how do you go about that disruption?
So what I did was I'd spent 20 years in the legal industry. I'd always worked in top tier firms here and abroad. And I had, as the years passed, noticed a disconnect in the value proposition. I realised that clients wanted more. The GFC had hit. They had less money to spend. In-house counsel, general counsel in particular, were being pressured to do more with less. And there had obviously been massive advances in technology, which made it entirely possible to create a model which was going to be far more nimble and agile and flexible than the traditional bricks and mortar pyramid structure firms, which I had spent, 2 decades across 2 continents honing my skills in. Yeah. And I think, when you look at how the traditional legal model is structured, you've typically got, you've got equity partners at the top taking high profit shares. You've then, you tier down to salaried partners, senior associates, special counsel, lawyers, paralegals. There's a lot of people's salaries that have to be paid. There is a mindset that people learn on the job. So, when you finish law school, you've learnt the basics, but you really learn your craft on the job. And in those firms, it has always been the case that the juniors get trained on the job, and that's not in the client's best interest.
It's not. I remember, because I was out of university, I started at Price Waterhouse. 18 months later, they merged with Coopers & Lybrand to become the largest accounting professional services firm in the world. PwC, and I remember feeling a little bit embarrassed going to client site as a green graduate coming out, knowing what hourly rate they were charging me out at, and obviously what they were paying me, and that I didn't really know anything apart from the studies at uni.
No, exactly. Well, and that's it. It becomes a question of what value did you add to that room? Well, probably very little, but you got a lot of value from being in that room, and the firm gained a lot of value from the learnings that you developed on the client's dime, essentially. So I looked at all of that and thought, you know what, there has to be a better way of doing this. There has to be a way where we could strip back all of the fluff and all of the we don't need fancy offices. We don't need high partner profit shares. We don't need 20 people doing the job that one person who was really well qualified and highly efficient could do. And so we started and I realized very quickly that once I'd started thinking about doing things differently, even though I'd spent 20 years in that environment, it was almost impossible to continue down that path because I just every time I looked at it, I had, what I call invoice remorse. I generate invoices. I would just think, when everything was linked to the number of hours spent and the hourly rate was so high that there just wasn't value in what they were getting.
Yep.
So to be able to disrupt, I had to really walk away from that career and take a risk and start from scratch and look at what the clients wanted, but not just what they were saying they wanted, but what I knew from 20 years experience they actually needed.
Yeah.
And then we built out an entire model based on what the clients want and need, as opposed to what best serves our pockets.
So does that mean then part of the disruption or your new model that you've done away with juniors and you're
we don't have juniors.
Right.
Yeah.
So you only go with highly skilled, experienced. Yeah.
Yeah, we've all got 20 plus years experience.
Yep.
And then the other thing we changed was the metrics, because I'm just fundamentally believe in culture. And I think that it's in the team's best interest, but ultimately the client's best interest if they're being serviced by a team which works collaboratively, is supportive, and is in an environment where wellbeing is maintained and fostered. Because this is an industry that's a tough industry. Attrition's really high, mental health issues and rates are really high. And there are a lot of reasons for that. As a lawyer, you do deal with stressful situations. You're dealing with people at difficult times in their lives.
Yes.
Even if it's an exciting, merger, there's still stress that goes with that because people are taking risks. So there is, yes, that element that you can't remove that because that's your job. But the other piece, the behind the scenes piece, where if your culture's not supportive and you're not promoting and giving people a platform to shine, or you're so preoccupied with your billable hour targets, which is a massive driver in the big firms, that you say, actually, do you know what? And human nature is what it is. If you've got to hit 6.5 or 7.6 billable hours a day, you've got to work a lot of hours, because a lot of what you do is just not billable to be able to hit that. Now, if your metrics are linked to that, and your promotion or your bonus or your increase in pay the following year is linked to how many hours you've billed, and people are going to, every time they get a pay increase, a lot of people then increase their spending, their outgoing. So human nature being what it is, will a lawyer sit there and say, actually, do you know what? I'm short 2 hours or 3 hours on my timesheet today. There's this piece of work. I can do it. I have got the skills. So it's not that I haven't. Now, Joe down the corridor is brilliant. He could do it in half an hour. I'm going to give it to him, or will you keep it? Yes. So there's that whole challenge, and everyone's different with the way they manage it. But I just think that as I keep saying, human nature is what it is, and people will have to protect their livelihood and their path and their progression. And so I wanted to remove all of that and just say, if you just got rid of it all and focused on what the clients need, how efficient could you be? Yeah,
I lived that 23 years ago. My God, I've just worked that out. At PwC, I remember that exactly. It was just used to shit me. They had to fill out a timesheet in 15-minute blocks. And that thing, if you are short, then you go scrounging for time. Some people will even fudge their time as well, which is obviously not in the client's best interest. But I remember distinctly having a conversation.
Fraudulent.
That's right.
There's that.
I remember distinctly having a conversation with my business partner in London. His brother-in-law is a lawyer, very big, very senior in a very big firm now. He's about my age. But he was in awe at one of the partners early on in his career saying to him, I don't care if you're thinking about a client on your way to the water cooler to get a drink of water, you bill those 6 minutes.
Absolutely. And you used to bill for travel time. You used to travel a lot. So, you'd bill from the minute you left your house, the taxi ride, the flight, like all of that. And I don't believe in that. I think that not to say that, we're not profitable, not to say that you can't still do well, but you don't need to live like that. And the clients didn't want that. And as time passed, I noticed that they definitely, once upon a time, they cared. They'd come to the office and they would value you. Some people would value you and your skills based on, this is the office, it's so fancy, you've got catering, you've got, you must be a good lawyer. But as time's gone on, it's become more about the lawyer and the service. And we have so many clients that we service nationally and internationally.
You've never met.
We haven't met.
Yeah,
we Zoom, and we've been Zooming long before COVID.
Yeah, that's great. And where did you spot this model of disruption somewhere else around in the world, or you've pretty much made it up?
Well, there's there's a bit of an irony here. So there had been legal disruption that had been on foot for a long time. I was blissfully unaware of it because I was in big law.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're in big law, you're quite focused on being in big law to survive and to progress.
Yep.
And I'd also had 3 children as well in that period of time, and relocated from Ireland back to Adelaide, which had all been quite disruptive. And so I had been very focused on coming back to Adelaide, reconnecting, building up, and just being the best I could be where I was. And I hadn't really looked outward at all.
Mm-hmm.
And which I'm really ashamed to say now, because I spend all my time now looking more broadly, but I didn't. And that's probably another risk when you're in those firms. You're in such a bubble that you lose that perspective. And that perspective is what shapes you and helps you to grow and evolve as a practitioner, as a business person, as a human. But I was seconded to a large company, and whilst I was on secondment, I noticed that they had a model where they had a lot of law firms give secondees to provide legal services. And that's a great model. The challenge is that the law firms, because you're billing in 6-minute intervals, don't actually spend the time really briefing you properly before you go. So you just kind of get dropped in, and then you have to sink or swim. So it's a very, and it's quite different being an external lawyer to being an in-house lawyer, because as an external lawyer, people are making a conscious choice. You know who's giving you the instructions. You've already checked that they've got authority to give them to you. When you're an in-house lawyer, you're sitting on the floor. You have to work out quite quickly who it is has authority to give you instructions, where they sit. You've got to go and have the discussions with them. They don't want you to give, the typical arm's length legal advice. You're in the business with them. Mm-hmm. So while I was sitting in there, I just thought, wouldn't it be really great, completely oblivious to what had been going on, in the legal movement generally. I thought, wouldn't it be really great if somebody set up a business where it was not about the 6-minute intervals, because it is impossible to get to know the clients properly. You can take them to the football, you can take them to dinner. It is just superficial small talk. It's that is not, that's relationship building in the sense of, getting to know them and at maybe a personal level, but it's not understanding. You're not going to have a discussion in a public space about what are their goals for the business? What's their risk appetite? What's their position on insurance, on indemnities? You're not going to have those discussions. And they're not going to pick up the phone and tell you that when you're billing in 6-minute intervals. And in a firm, when you've got a timesheet, have you got that time to invest? And they probably don't want to talk to you about it anyway, because they're wondering where it goes. So I thought, wouldn't it be really amazing if somebody set up a model where you actually invested really heavily in the genuine building of relationships over time, but to be able to do that, obviously I had to remove a lot of the other structures that were in place that inhibit that. So that was really how it came about. And then I went back and worked for the firm that I had been in for another year, and my heart just wasn't in it.
Yeah. So I'm assuming you would have got a few people with this new model would have said to you, when you had built those relationship building activities that you were doing, a few people would have said to you, is the meter on?
Oh, I mean, at the beginning, definitely, it was difficult. It was, when you talk about an elevator pitch, it was difficult to crack the elevator pitch for us, because we were trying, because typically for people to connect and understand what you're saying, they have a reference point to draw from. And when you're explaining that what you do is something new, you've got to find a language to describe that they can connect with in some way. And what we were really trying to say was, you're going to get the same top-tier service. You've got people who've all been trained in international top-tier firms, worked for major international companies or organisations, or the government regulators and bodies. You're getting that whole same experience, but you're getting it in an unbundled, super flexible, really personable way. But how do you actually explain what the difference is until they experience it? And a big part of the difference was, you're not on the clock. So we will actually give you our time, because we believe that you will be converted, and that as the years pass, you will continue to come back to us, and not because we're trying to steal anyone else's work, and not because we're going to come in, you're going to give us a window and we're going to push it open and make it a door, but because we are actually really respectful of the relationship, and we'll do a really good job with what it is you want us to do.
So it sounds like you've got a real genuine and authentic attitude towards helping your customers, which from my experience will bear out in time with customer retention and also conversion, because word will get around. Is that something?
And absolutely. And loyalty. I mean, we were literally a startup. No clients. I had a restraint of trade. So we've started from nothing and built it up.
Yep.
And it was really important to us that we had the successful runs on the board and the recommendations. And Adelaide's, a small city.
1.3 million.
Yeah. Reputation's everything. And as I said, we do work nationally and internationally, but certainly you want to be well regarded within your home market.
Yep.
That was really important.
Yeah, great. Just to close out, starting up the business then, how old were you when you decided to jump career and go
38.
38 in the business by yourself?
38, 3 kids, 2, 4 and 8.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. I still had 2 children at home.
Yeah.
Yes, it was it was busy. Yeah.
And how long was your restraint of trade?
6 months.
6 months, that's not too bad. So basically you couldn't provide any charge for any legal advice. You use that 6 months to set up and really get things ready.
Yeah, I mean, I could to new clients, but not to existing clients.
Got it.
And I used that time because after all those years in big law, I had started to feel really suffocated in the end. And I think for somebody like me who had always performed really well and billed really well and succeeded in those environments, it was to get to the point that I just didn't believe in it anymore was actually a really hard thing.
Yeah.
And it was really a difficult decision to walk away and say, well, I've put up with all of this and I've worked every hour under the sun and I've traveled everywhere and I've done all of this for all these years, and I'm going to walk away and I'm going to say, do you know what? I don't care about the financial stability. I don't care, because ultimately I want to build something that I'm proud of and I want to make a contribution that's meaningful, and I don't want to be frustrated and I want to have a voice. And so that, that was a really, really hard thing to do. And I think it took me a little while, I'd say a good couple of years, really to find my true voice, to be comfortable, because I was very concerned at the beginning that I didn't, because there is a place, I'm grateful to Big Law for having given me exceptional training. There will always be, I think, a place for Big Law for certain types of matters. So I never wanted it to come across as though I was being critical or that I was biting the hand that had fed me or any of that sort of thing. But yet, I truly didn't believe in it anymore. And I really did think that for a whole heap of other clients in between, there was a really better alternative option. And that looked a lot like what we were going to provide.
Yep.
So I felt as though I needed a little bit of distance between the environment I had left, where, particularly the last job was a national firm where there were a lot of checks and balances.
Yep.
To get my head in the game to say, you are going to be a founder and managing director, the buck starts and stops with you.
Yep.
What is it? Like, to really pinpoint, I had this idea. It's great having an idea, but you've got to translate an idea into something more than that. And to do that, you've got to think about the brand, the values, the mission, all of that stuff. So I used those first few months really to take stock and let those ideas percolate. I didn't have something, a practice ready to walk into, but I certainly had, the branding and that kind of, and I was developing it, and it was important, I think, to give myself the space to get it right, because I wanted to start as I meant to continue. And I hadn't been, I'd been very overstretched in terms of my kids prior to that. So I also devoted some time to just being able to be with them in unhurried moments, which was really important when they were little, and to go on every school excursion and to, chair the parents and friends, which I've done for the last 3 years, and all those things that when I had worked for somebody else, it was impossible to do because my time wasn't my own. I'd say, I'm going to go on an excursion, and you've got to go to Melbourne tomorrow, that kind of thing. So it was, I just regained control of my life and thought about how I was going to build this business. So that's what I largely did in that period of time. That's
good, Mellissa, and really important that you took that time out. I think it's up to age 7 is when the greatest bond generally with kids is developed with their parents. So the more time, obviously, present time you can spend with them, the better.
It's a small window when they want you to be there, and I say that with no judgment, because having been in the position where I had to work, and I was in an environment where you had to work a lot and you had to go to the office. and, you know, people make the choices that are the right choices for them, or the choices they have to make at different points.
Yeah.
I'm just really, really grateful that I got to a point where I could make different choices, which were not easy, and, you know, and obviously came at a cost, but that have allowed me to be able to drop them off and pick them up and be there and do all those things that I wanted to be able to do. Very grateful.
Right. I was going to ask, the transition out of corporate into your own business, there's a lot of mindsets and habits that you have to break, particularly in a profession. How did you go with that?
It was really hard. Honestly, it was really hard, particularly because the legal profession's so heavily regulated. So we were in this space where what we were wanting to do was dynamic and different, and I had to keep having reference to our code of conduct and the rules, and even, you know, something, I had this idea that, which I believe is really important, that clients need not just legal services but advisory services as well. So because I had drafted so many really complicated contracts, and I know that they would pay for them and then they'd stick them in the drawer, and it wasn't until a dispute arose that they'd then pull them out again and say, oh, actually, we've now got a problem, but wouldn't have followed the processes because no one wanted to look at the contract, because it was, you know, they just wanted to get on and do it. And also because they didn't have the skills and they weren't going to hire a contract manager. And I knew that so I had this idea that wouldn't it be great that you could do it, but also then provide the contract management services. The slight glitch in that is that in South Australia, you can't have what's called a multidisciplinary practice. So you have to, so then I had to think through, well, how are we going to manage this? Hence the Peripheral Blue Legal and the Peripheral Blue Consulting arms under the Peripheral Blue banner, so that they're not competing against one another in Google. And separate terms of engagement. So we had to sort of work through those practical aspects. But just generally in terms of, and also I think things like marketing as well, like the messaging, again, in a very conservative industry, regulated, I was not comfortable. I've gotten a lot more comfortable as time's gone on with our messaging, but I was super cautious at the beginning, almost to the point perhaps that I wasn't as clear as I might have. I certainly wasn't as to the point as I would have liked to have been. So that has sort of, that messaging has evolved a bit over the years. And I think the other aspect is just that the mindset as an employee in a professional services role is that very much, you know, you're taking your instructions, it's quite conservative, you dress in a particular way, you behave, you interact. It took me a little while to be a little bit less structured, a little bit probably truer to myself. And we've seen that even in the photographs we have taken for our team over the 4 years. You've just seen that unbundling of us from the suited up look, from the suits, from who we thought we had to appear to be, because that's the image of a lawyer, to actually who we are, because our clients like us because we're actually really approachable and we're relaxed and we do a good job. But if you're going to have to sit with your lawyer till midnight because you're in the middle of a dispute or a deal, we're probably quite good company in that sense, because we're pretty relaxed. So we've gotten a lot more comfortable with saying, you know what, we're good enough at what we do that we can be exactly who we are and represent that and be true to ourselves and authentic. And we don't have to pretend. If you want a suited up lawyer, if you want, you know, not to say that if we, you know, obviously if we present to the board in large companies, we get suited up, but the rest of the time, you know, you will find us in our jeans, you'll find us in our runners, but you might find us in our gym clothes, but that's okay because we're getting the work done. So all of that has kind of changed. And I think the other thing that was really, really difficult for me, because I am quite a private person, and certainly for social media, I don't use it in my own life. I mean, I have accounts, but you won't really gain any great insight into me personally on there. Was being comfortable with putting myself out there. So doing something like an interview like this, having my face on the website in the first iteration of our website, I really struggled with. I had basically no personal profile at all. Was pretty much invisible when I started this business. And so that has been probably one of the biggest shifts. And the fact that I'm very much advocate for our team, for all of our team members to have a digital footprint, to have a profile, and that we push that, because I want them all to have that, because it's so important. That they were big shifts in mindset.
Well, do you have some key numbers you can share to illustrate the growth of the business?
Well, we started from nothing, so that was that's pretty easy to determine.
That's one number. Yep. So over 4 years. Yep.
Yeah, we've had 267% growth year on year, so we've done really well. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. But and you know what the best thing about that has been is that we've done it in a culture that's really lovely.
Yep.
We've still serviced amazing clients, massive organisations, rapidly growing SMEs, not just here in Adelaide, but as I said, nationally, internationally. And I think the thing I'm proudest about is that I hope that the messaging is there, that it's actually really possible to do high quality work where the value proposition is there, in a culture that is supportive and collaborative, where your team are happy, your clients are happy, and you still have a life.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
And what about that team? So how many did you start with FTE, and what are you up to now?
We started with me. And very shortly thereafter, we added Cara Birch, who's our Director of Policy and Compliance. And I'll always be grateful that she took a punt. We were building the business and growing it, and she left her job to join. And I suppose when you do that, you hope that this person's vision's going to play out. And that we worked really hard to build those client relationships. And then shortly after that, we had another key team member join us, Sarah Thompson, who moved back from the UK. And the interesting thing is all three of us went to law school together.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So in different year levels, but all at the same time. So that's lovely. So in terms of the trust and the long-term relationship, that's been really important. And then we sort of continued to grow out. And so we've got now 6 plus another 2 consultants. Yeah,
great. And you use a few virtual team members as well?
I do, yes. So we set up the practice to be paperless from the get-go, and that's been awesome because that means that even our EAs can work from home.
Yep.
They're welcome to come into the office if they would like to, but they don't have to. We have a VA as well in the Philippines who's been with us for several years now, and she's awesome.
Yep.
And so we work hard to create that collaborative culture, which you do have to work a little bit harder when people are in different locations and culturally different, but we've done, I think, a good job of that, and we've had the same team the whole way. We just keep adding to it, so that continuity has been really good too.
So the EAs and the VA included in that 6 FTE, or that's on top of?
That's on top of, yeah.
Yeah. So would you say 8 or 9?
Yeah, around that. Yeah.
Great. That's tremendous growth in 4 years.
Yeah.
When was the moment you felt like you'd succeeded?
Oh, gosh. I think probably when we won our first big piece of work. I think when we actually, there were probably 2 moments. One, when I signed a former client of mine, a large company, and that was instrumental because I had been concerned. One of the things that had put me off doing this was because of the type of clients I'd always serviced in the firms I'd been in. They were big organisations, and I was always very concerned that those types of companies chose organisations and firms because they picked the brand and the size and the might, and that they wouldn't then pick me, as I then was, because it was just me initially, that wouldn't be enough. And when it was, with a really really large organisation, I felt a huge sigh of relief because I thought, wow, okay, this is going to work. Because otherwise, my skill set didn't actually. A lot of people historically, if they were a smaller law firm, they would do a particular type of work, and that's not our skill set. We don't do wills and estates. We don't do personal injury. We don't do motor vehicle. We don't do criminal. We don't do that sort of work or family. We do big. The corporate, commercial and corporate work that big organisations or rapidly growing SMEs need. So I needed to know that that client avatar would actually choose us. So I think the point at which they did was when I realised, okay, this is going to work.
Yeah, great. And what does success look like to you?
For me, success is about living life on my own terms, about it was always important to me to do something I loved. And thankfully, I always loved being a lawyer. I might not have always liked where I worked. I might not have always liked the environment, but I actually always loved the job itself. So for me, it's been about taking that. And then, look, I never ever thought I would be an entrepreneur. I never even thought I'd be a manager. I never even wanted to be managing director of a law firm. I mean, that was just not even on the horizon. I just wanted to be a good lawyer, the best lawyer I could be. So I think for me, success has been about saying, I get to do that job that I've always loved, and now I get to do it in a way that I have, that I just believe genuinely we're doing the right thing by the clients, and I've been able to create these jobs and this amazing environment for other team members, and that makes me really, really proud. So to me, that's what success looks like.
Great. Number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast-growing business?
I think you've got to be really clear on who your client avatar is and what your messaging is and how quickly you can grow. Because we could have grown, we had never actually marketed and done paid marketing. And the reason we hadn't was because we only hire a particular type of person, so they've got to fit the criteria for hiring, which means top tier trained and then have worked in-house or for the government, because that makes you a different type of lawyer, and you're more accessible and approachable, and you think in a more corporate way. And so we've always been very careful with how the rate at which we've grown, because we've had to find the people who fit the culture, who provide that sort of service in the right way, and so that the growth wouldn't be out of step, or that we wouldn't have grown at the expense of the quality. So I think that when you're looking at your marketing strategy, you have to think about who it is that you want to target now. And is that going to be the same? You've got to continuously reflect on that, because that can evolve over time. And I think the other thing we often do is, I will say, and when COVID hit, we sat down as a team and said, okay, let's just reflect. We started off saying this was the client avatar. Okay, this is now our history and our experience now that we've done it. Let's just reflect. Are we still happy? What work do we actually really enjoy doing? Because we're in a position where we can choose, which is wonderful.
It's great.
What do we want to do? And do we want to stay focused on that same path? And I think that's important as well, because you can be really busy chasing work or doing work that's not profitable or that you don't like. And if you do stuff you like, you'll do it better. You'll enjoy it more, and then everything else just sort of naturally flows. So I think that they're all really important aspects when you're thinking about marketing.
So when you sat down to reflect on that, did you change the avatar or
no? We love what we do, but it was just important to ask the question
and reaffirm it. That's good to be reminded of it. That's excellent. How did you fund your business?
Myself, my husband and I. We were, I suppose, fortunate in the sense that it's not as expensive to start up a virtual law firm. Like we have an office now, but at the beginning it was me. And we've, over the time we changed the practice management software we've added. So the on costs are a lot higher now than they were at the beginning, but it was possible to be fairly lean at the outset. And I didn't want to have a loan. So we self-funded.
No loan, no investors, no government grants, just cash flow.
And cash flow became king.
I
learned very quickly about cash flow.
If you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so our audience can learn from it?
Every time we grow. Every time we hit a new hire, every time we hit, when we were taking office space, when we're looking at hiring, it doesn't matter who we're hiring, whether it's an EA or a VA or a new lawyer or a consultant, it's about that commitment, because you're saying, you're looking at the metrics and you have to work out, okay, we've got this work coming in. To grow, we need to be able to have this person there on the ground to be able to do the work. Have we got enough for them? And you're taking a risk, and it's sort of that loss leader, and then they've got to be onboarded, and you've got to invest time, and then you're hoping it's the right person. So I find that, and also because I'm absolutely obsessive about the culture. The culture is so important to me and to the team that every time we make a hire, it's about finding the right person who's going to fit.
What area in business for you you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
Marketing and selling. I mean, I knew that I knew how to be a lawyer. if you had asked me in 2016, even the beginning of 2017, Mellissa, can you sell? I would have told you I could not sell. I did not know how to sell.
Yeah.
That is a massive problem if you are the founder of a law firm.
Yes.
The reality is I did know how to sell. I had been doing it for 20 years, but the difference, I didn't, but it was different. It felt different to me being an employee of a company and going out and selling that company because that was someone else's.
Mm-hmm.
But to actually go out and sell I was effectively selling myself.
Yeah.
I found that really conceptually difficult to be able to go in and say, we're really awesome.
Yeah.
You know, obviously there's an appropriate way to say that in a way that works. But that for me was difficult. And also because I'm not mad into social media, learning about social media for the business, and we use it a lot for the business. I had to really push myself out of my comfort zone to put myself out there because people needed to know me and what I believe in. And you know, you don't have to talk to me for very long to know that we genuinely do believe, you know, in what we're doing, and that we are very honest and trustworthy. And there was a great value in that because one of the most commonly held beliefs about lawyers is that people don't trust them.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
Yeah. And all of those things I found really because I'd always been very proud of being a lawyer, and it had never crossed my mind that people didn't trust us. And it was when I was starting to do my due diligence for the marketing sales piece that I started asking people, and I was lecturing a group of students on a contract law course in an MBA program, and I asked them just, you know, obviously I'd be really interested to know, like I won't be offended, but what are your views? And unanimously, no one trusts lawyers. They're in the category with used car salesmen.
I was going to say, I've seen surveys where the used car salespeople are just above lawyers.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and it's also about associations. Like people don't like to go to. People have negative associations with their dentist.
Yeah.
Because you're going usually. I know you go for maintenance, but often it's expensive.
Yep.
You're paying for something you don't actually want. You don't enjoy.
Yeah.
And it's a bit the same with a lawyer.
Yeah.
And so, but that was actually really informative for me because once I understood that, I said, you know what, actually, let's flip this. If you didn't leave it until the very end, if you didn't only see your lawyer when something blew up, and the only reason you're doing that is or if you didn't only leave it to the 11th hour to instruct your lawyer because you're trying to minimize the amount of time they can spend because you think they're going to overcharge you.
Yeah.
If you actually had a good relationship with your lawyer, you would engage them proactively and you'd have positive associations because they'd be your trusted advisor.
Yep.
And so that's what we flipped it to. That was actually really useful to ask those questions. It was a bit confronting, but I've just owned it and I stand there and smile with all the lawyer jokes because I get it. I know why people feel like that.
That's good. And what have you enjoyed least about managing the fast growth?
I think the stress around making those decisions with the risk. You have to bear in mind, my job is about risk management. I mean, I get paid to advise people about risk. Yeah. So it's actually quite difficult to put yourself in the position where you are being the risk taker when every fiber in my being is like, avoid risk. So that has been a challenge for me, but it's part of growth. And so I've learned to lean into it.
Yep. And what do you love most about growing a small business?
I love the fact that we're actually creating something that genuinely is doing things differently. And it's been really lovely, not that you do it for that recognition, but it's been really lovely when I know that what we're doing is different. I know that, when I get the client's feedback, and we've recently had a round of video testimonials, that I just thought, oh, wow, this is huge. Like actually everything we set out to do, they're now telling us this is their experience of us. Great. So that's so satisfying. But we've been fortunate on the award front, and that has also validated a lot of what we've done because that's objective assessment.
Yeah, I saw that on your website, Telstra Business Award last year and this year.
Yeah, so we were finalists for the business one, and then I was lucky enough to be successful as the businesswoman this year. So that was really lovely.
Well done.
Thank you. Yeah, but even going through that process, forces you. I mean, that's quite a rigorous process for the Telstra Awards, and it was a huge accomplishment to get to that point, as from startup to there. But it also forced us to reflect on the business and not just be busy on the business of being in the business.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we When I was at Lark, we won the Telstra Business Award for Tasmania for the small business category and overall for Tasmania, 2014, I think.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, it was Bill and Lynn and the family that had founded the business, obviously, and the team. I'd only been there for a year or so, but I decided to put us in and delegated most of the initial work for the application.
But yeah, so you know what's involved, yeah.
Oh yeah, I know what's involved. Yeah. But yeah, it was great reflecting on. Well, it highlighted a few weaknesses and risks around the business. It was a good process to go through, but more so, and there's a bit of branding and marketing which comes from it, but also it gives that validation to the team particularly, and the shareholders and your customers that you're doing all right. You've done a great job. It's a highly competitive award. So yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
What has been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
I think it's been that as I've probably already talked about, that freeing up of the way I approach things and being a bit more willing to put myself out there and take risks and be open to new opportunities. I've learned to say yes. I've learned two things. I've learned to say yes to opportunities, and then I work out how to do it. And I think, the more times you put yourself in those situations and you succeed, it gives you more confidence. And I've also learned to say no. I've learned to prioritize my time and value myself and my team. And so we're very selective about our clients, and we really like who we work with.
That's good. It's fucking hard to do though. Early on in my career, you would say yes to everyone and anything, and you just work crazy hours, and there was no focus.
And if you're doing that, you can always be busy.
Yeah.
But are you being productive? Is it focused? Is it is there a proper growth strategy?
Yep.
Is it profitable? And and there'll be a lot of people who hit you up. I think that's the other thing. You get the more sort of profile you get, that you get hit up more for. And there are people who add value to your life, and there are people who are distractions. And we like to give back. We do a lot of we've done a lot with mentoring the legal forecast here in South Australia, speaking at, three of us went to Flinders Uni, so speaking at the law school, doing, legal disruption tech events, that kind of thing. So we're so happy to give back in that way, but in terms of, do I have time to, have coffees with people who want to pick my brains? No.
Yeah.
And I've learned to say no. I've learned to be because my time is really valuable, and I'm building something. And I think the fact that other people, that the team rely on me as well to be growing and building something, that has also forced me to value my time. It's a bit like when people say they've got children, and they might burn the candle at both ends, and then suddenly they realize actually they've got to be responsible for someone else, that it forces them to be a little bit more structured. So I think there's an element of that too.
Yeah, totally. What's the number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
You've got to be disciplined, really, really disciplined and structured. I think you've got to see, you've got to get a system in place that works for you and your life, and you can't have, and whether that be that you need to go into the office every day for certain hours, or whether that be that you're somebody who works more in a more fluid way, but you still need to set yourself targets for, I've got to get through this number of activities. I'm going to do it in this way. I try to work in sprints of my time. I have a massive focus on productivity. So for example, I'm not somebody who's ever liked exercising. I exercise now because it increases my clarity of thought and my productivity.
That's right. It gives you more energy. Absolutely.
Yeah, I have this Aura ring because this Aura ring tracks, my sleep, my readiness, all of that. So there's so many different aspects to my life that I change and structure about being focused and productive, and about the way in which I work. And I think that those sorts of overarching habits are really, really important.
Definitely. Yeah, on the work sprints you mentioned a minute ago, I remember reading, I would follow, I think it was Howard Schwartz, who's a Harvard professor, and he was really big on 90-minute sprints.
Yeah.
So focusing, buckling down, and going off and doing something else.
Then you have a 20-minute break, but you have to completely, so you do 90 minutes, then a 20-minute break, then 90 minutes. And that for me has, because, a lot of, when we're drafting, a lot of the contracts that we would do would be quite technically difficult and quite voluminous. And particularly if you're and some of them are a bit like putting a jigsaw puzzle together. If you've got a whole heap in a project sit together, and it's very easy to get lost in that for hours at a time. Now, I query whether if you were to sit there for 4 hours straight, you're actually A, healthy, or B, productive. You're not. No. But yeah, it's been again about having discipline. So I actually have sitting on my computer here, like a post-it note that says 90 minutes, 20 minutes, 90. Right. I've got a lot of visual prompts for that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Have you read Cal Newport's book, Deep Work?
No, but
it's a great one. It's very much about that focus and the optimal time you can get out of your day. It's a great book.
And I think that's the other thing, is about being super efficient. So I do a lot while I'm on the move as well. You won't ever see me sort of sitting in the car not doing the phone calls that I need to do, or waiting and making sure that I'm clicking on the email. So it's about how do you maximize your time as productively as you can, I think, for me anyway.
Yeah, look, I agree with that. I listen to my podcast when I'm exercising or I'm cleaning the house. I make all my phone calls pretty much when I'm either in the car or cleaning the house. Yeah. Because it's dead time that I can be using. So I had to ring the tax office the other day, and I knew that was going to be an excruciatingly painful long phone call. Yeah. So I knew I had a half an hour, 40-minute car drive, and I did it in that time.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, it's because you then don't feel like it's wasted time.
Yeah, that's right.
Find it hard to define a clear strategy, then communicate it and execute it alongside the rest of your team? Or you currently don't work a simple quarterly strategic plan to boost your team's performance? Our Business Growth Formula online course is perfect for small business owners with 5 to 30 team members wanting to grow. We share the mindsets, habits and tools to be a legendary leader in your business. growasmallbusiness.com.
Can you talk about how you added people to the team, some wins, mistakes and advice for those listening?
Sure. So as I said, 3 of us went to law school together. So that was a lovely way of adding people, because we knew one another and had that trust and the rapport. But we also had different skill sets, and we have different personality, 3 very different personality types, but that are complementary. And we knew that would, I say we knew that would work well. I mean, I don't know that you ever really know, because you can be good friends and that can be a recipe for disaster. Yes. And a number of people have said to me, I'm astounded, it's pretty exceptional that you could have all been friends and that you all get along so well working together. But I think there's a degree of it's a huge amount of respect. And not that we stay in our own lanes. We do come together, but we do have different specialisms. So that has worked quite well. The consultants we had were again recommended. So a very good friend, my best friend from high school, had trained in a top tier firm with one of the ladies, and that lady had then gone on and worked in-house. And so I knew, again, that spoke to her character. I knew the training was there. It spoke to her character. So that was, and then when we needed someone in a different space, she then recommended someone who she had worked in that in-house firm with, who also fit our hiring criteria. But again, we knew from a cultural fit it would be right, but from a do we share the same values perspective? There was that alignment. Yep. The VA was obviously different because she's in a different country, and that was a part of a process. And then we've trialed, and I was very honest and said, look, even though because I was mindful that culturally I didn't want her to think she couldn't make suggestions, because a big part of what we do is about always challenging new ideas about how could we do things better, and that's not being critical, that's just saying it's always striving to be the best you can be. And she, having a different background again, could come into our business and see different ways of doing things that might be more efficient. So it was very much about inviting her to embrace that culture, and she's been awesome. So
it's interesting. It's hard. I've got 2 team members in the Philippines, and it's been challenging to adjust to that. I still ask one of them. She's been working with me for now, I think, 3 years. Occasionally I try again and say, please stop calling me sir. It's very sweet, but it's for the audience. It's 83% of the population is Catholic. They've got very good English because of occupation after World War II by the Americans. Very good work ethic, but there's just some of those cultural nuances. Very respectful, yeah. So it's hard to get them to open up and put forward their ideas because that fear of bypassing the authority, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're right. And so we've been really fortunate that that Glazer works really well and feels comfortable talking to us and raising stuff. So and she'd had experience with Australian companies before, not in the legal industry. So she was quite brave to take on moving to the legal industry, but she's done an amazing job. And our other EA was my former secretary from my old firm, who I'd worked with, who's amazing. And then the other people have been people who we have either been recommended to us because one of us has worked with them elsewhere, or because we know that we've come across them on the other side of a deal, or that kind of thing. So everyone's been there, and or because one of us has worked with them, even if it has been a long time ago, and they've had a divergent career path in between, but there's still that connection, so that there's the trust. And to be honest, it's an ongoing challenge because we have needed to hire more people for a while. We've just gone through a round of hiring, and I am so cautious, cautious, as you can tell. So I like to know them.
It's so important. It's as the Mark from Manager School says, it's the most important thing a manager does is recruitment, getting the right people on the bus, and it's fucking hard to do.
It's really hard. Yeah, it's really, really hard. And and people can present. They can have awesome CVs. They can present in a particular way, and you just don't know. And the other risk that we have, I think, is that because I do talk a lot about how flexible we are, and but we are highly responsive. So it's not a doddle working here. It's lovely. It's much nicer than working, I think, than working in a traditional firm where you've got your billable targets flashing up, on your screen, and you've got that sort of those metrics hanging over your head, and you're in some sort of gladiatorial combat every day. It's much nicer than that, but it's still. We still have clients who use those other firms, so they expect that same level of responsiveness, and they still and accessibility, and so you still need to really perform. And so it's about making sure that my messaging is clear to people about what we expect. I don't care where they do the work. I don't care whether they're in the office or at home. Sometimes we're at the client's offices. I don't care if they want to work part-time and they do it over 7 days, or they want to do all of it. I really don't mind, as long as I can trust them and it's done. But it has to be done, and it's got to be done to the quality that we and our clients expect. And so that's why the hiring's been really important, and that's what I found fascinating about COVID, actually, is that, for us, where we hired and built an entire team based on picking people who we knew that were trustworthy and that would work really productively in a remote setting if required, to watch how some of our clients have had to pivot, where people who were not hired on that basis have then had to go and work remotely, and what that has looked like in terms of profitability and outcomes and performance. And that's been really interesting.
What about any mistakes or advice in adding people to the team? Did you stuff any hires up?
I did one, and that was tricky. That was a really good lesson for me early on, and I think that the thing to remember is, if you've made a mistake and you know, like, don't keep trying to make it's not actually your job to try to make it better for someone else. It's not actually, if you're having to put layers of scaffolding in, like, what, you just need to give up. You just need to say, enough's enough, and my time's worth more than this. I need people who are here to take the work off and the load off me. I'm not here to babysit them and to cajole them into doing the job that they're actually lucky enough to have. So, and the other thing, I think, is that people, sometimes really awesome people, have a really rough spot. And it's because life happens. And people can have, marriage breakups,
deaths,
problems with children, a whole heap of stuff. And that can deeply affect people in different ways. And there comes a point where, how long do you give people who are otherwise really, really good performers? How wide a window do you give them to? And I think when I look at that, we did, I mean, I think my view on that has become, you can tell if, I have great empathy, the things happen, but you can tell if in the midst of things happening, people are still focusing and trying to prioritize what little energy they've got left on doing a really good job for you, or whether they become so divergent that they pick up 20 million other hobbies as distractions at the expense of what you're doing. And so that's what I've become probably a bit more ruthless about, in saying, we have worked really, really hard. And that's the other messaging I give, even for external providers who are providing services to us. I'm sometimes as blunt as this to say, our heart and soul has gone into this business. There is not one decision, one logo, one look that has not been carefully curated and vetted by us. So to the extent that you give me something that is half-baked, that is so disrespectful to me and my team, because what you're basically saying is you don't care enough about what we have toiled and put our heart and soul into building. So please, value us. And us and the custom that we're giving you, and give us your best game, please. And I found that people respond well to that.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah. What are some things you recommend building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
Hire the right people. And if they're not the right people, get them out. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, and that there's, we have a massive, as I keep saying, massive focus on wellbeing and culture. I think it's really important to understand what drives people, and what motivates people is different at different times in their life and their career. So for some of us, and there can also be assumptions about what's important to people. So you might look and say, you've got kids, therefore maybe you want to work remotely, but maybe they don't. Maybe they want to work in the office to get away from the kids because they can't, work quietly at home. Or maybe, I've worked with people over the years, not in my own firm, but previously, where I was acutely aware of the fact that as much as I had kids and never wanted to use my kids as an excuse for not being able to be there, so I used to, leave, put them to bed, come back in, or work from home late at night, there were people who had no children and they felt like they didn't have those same excuses to be able to leave. So they felt like they were the ones. So I've always been very aware that they deserve to be able to have a life and a hobby as well, and whatever it was, whatever their passion was, because it's not just because you've got children and therefore you've got a justification to leave or to do something. Everyone deserves that right. So I think it's about looking, and so for us, everything we do is collaborative. We've just had another round of photos done. I won't sit there and pick the photographs. So they're actually going through the whole team. Everyone will vet every single photo. Now, that comes at a cost, obviously, because it's people's time spent doing that. But to me, in terms of the culture, everyone will be happy then that they're not having a photograph that goes up that they don't like of themselves. They're part of the process. They're involved. It's all of, we don't put a proposal to clients without everyone involved having a view on it. We don't agree that people are going to go and sit in clients' offices on certain times and just tell them that's what's happening. We don't do any of that stuff. So it's very much about everyone together jointly making decisions, and I think that's really imperative to a culture where people feel heard and valued. And really, whatever the other drivers are, you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who doesn't want to feel heard and valued.
Yeah, totally agree. Tell our audience how you've handled balance.
Well, I like to say that I have a work-life blend. I'm not sure that balance is the right. I don't even really believe in balance. I don't even know what balance would look like for me. I've, as I said, have 3 boys. We're busy with them, obviously, as anyone with any number of children knows. It's busy. My husband, in the pre and presumably post-COVID world, usually travels a lot. So I have got my hands full, and obviously the business is busy. So for me, I wanted to create the life that I wanted to live. And for me, that I have always been the sort of person that, there are some people who like to only work from 8 to 6 and switch off and go home. I've never been that person. So I really like what I do. I've always found it, I've never been the sort of person who wanted to go on holiday and switch off and then come back to 500 emails. That's just not me. So this works really well for me, because I say, okay, I can, I manage, I can still take my kids to soccer and all the things I couldn't ever get them to when I worked for somebody else, because I couldn't physically, pick them up and get them changed and fed and there on time. But I am always working, and it probably often looks like I'm not working at all, because it's just part of my life. Yes. And I'm very comfortable with that now. But I am also, obviously, as I've said, a real stickler for productivity. So I have finite windows of uninterrupted time, which I make sure, because I do all the other stuff. So yoga, Pilates, running, strength training as I get older now, all of that other sort of stuff. And I have the Oura ring to really focus on the sleep and the readiness. And, that also tells me then, you've eaten too late at night, or you've done whatever, your resting heart rate was lower, your readiness isn't going to be so good the next day. I'm so mindful of all of that stuff to help me live what I call the blend of being able to do all of this and still volunteer, at my older girls' school on their Old Scholars Committee to help, build programs for professional networks for the girls, and to chair the PNF at my boys' school, and to do all of those other things that I find the time to do, but because it just all sort of naturally blends, and I like what I do. And I think my hobbies really are all related in some way or other to the business and upskilling, because I love learning about new things.
Yeah. Well, that's the next question. Professional development, obviously you would do it a lot as a technician, as a lawyer, but what kind of professional development have you invested in yourself on the business side of things?
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot. Yeah, so we do, from a professional standpoint, we have to do 10 CPD hours a year for the, to meet our Law Society requirements. But I have invested heavily in myself in terms of learning about marketing, selling, social media, brand development, all of that kind of, how to give the best talks and presentations. I've spent a lot of time, effort, and I spend a lot of time every week investing in that.
Yeah, good. What about mentors or coaches? Have you had some along the way?
I have. I was really lucky when I was in Ireland working in a really large firm, but which was an awesome firm. I had the most amazing female mentor as my supervising partner, who is still the voice in my head now when I have a tricky question, and still is my phone a friend, actually, if I want to unpack a really difficult legal concept, because I value her opinion. But is also the person who taught me to sleep on it if I wasn't sure, and to have the faith and to try giving it a shot. So from a technical perspective, it was her, definitely, and so grateful for having had that experience and that support and that training early on. And then when I started the business, I realized pretty quickly, when you do a gap analysis, the gap analysis was the selling and the marketing. And I was just so used to being so honest isn't the right word, but probably straight down the line. And there are different ways to express things that are a bit more palatable than that.
So did you get a mentor or coach?
I did, I did, on who was my exact opposite, which was exactly what I needed.
Great. And how did you find them, out of interest?
Through LinkedIn.
Right. Yep.
So I did a course on how as I said, I had no profile when I started this business, and I needed to understand how to build a personal profile. So I needed someone to help me with that, and someone to challenge me, to push me out of my comfort zone, to say, actually, you're going to have to get up and say this, and how would you do that? And well, maybe you could. Someone who was a bit more commercial, because my whole life had been spent, yes, I'd advise people on commercial issues, absolutely, but they were on, $100 million deals, on massive developments, on projects, not on how do you best pitch something so that it's the most attractive proposition to someone, or how do you convert a cold lead, or how does a cold lead become a warm lead? Or I didn't know anything about any of that stuff. So that was what I invested in initially. We started in the October 2016. By the Easter of 2017, I had invested in a course to do that. And then a few months later, I then took a mentor for a year.
Great.
Yeah.
Terrific. Do you have a board of directors or advisors at the moment?
No.
All right, Mellissa, we're on to our final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
I think it is accepting the risks, and the fact that every time you grow, that presumably you want to grow. We're never happy where we are. I mean, we're grateful always to be where we are, but we are always looking to get bigger and offer more broad offerings. And you've then got to, get comfortable with the risk and then make it happen. So I think that's always a bit of a challenge.
Yep. Favorite business book which has helped you the most?
The Secrets of Closing the Sale by Zig Ziglar.
Oh, I love Zig Ziglar. Rest his soul. He was a great business person and salesperson early in his
I found that he was, and I found that really insightful. Just things that I had never stopped to think about.
Yeah.
Which I really needed to learn to think about.
Yes. Yeah.
That insight. Yeah.
Any great podcasts or online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
I listen to a whole heap of different, obviously we've got all the legal ones that we listen to from our technical PD and a lot from Thomson Reuters. And I like a lot of Sabri Subi's.
Sell Like Crazy? Yeah, I'm just started to listen to his book Sell Like Crazy at the moment, actually. Yeah.
And I like the philosophy. And I have found a lot of the learnings and teachings really insightful.
Yeah, great. One tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
LinkedIn was really, I think it depends on the business. Yeah, LinkedIn was good for us, but that's, professional services, business to business. It was a great way of being able to build our profile and our platform. But I mean, there are a whole heap of other tools we use behind the scenes as well. We've got, things like Infusionsoft and Calendly and Monday and Teams, all of that other good stuff. But in terms of what helped us at the beginning, that was definitely a good platform for us.
Yeah. Last and my favourite question, what would you tell yourself on day one of starting out?
You can do this.
Great. Perfect. Thank you very much for your time today, Mellissa. I think the audience got a lot of value out of your journey and what you've achieved, and with the wider team as well. Congratulations to you all. And
thank you.
Look forward to hearing about the future success.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for your time.
No worries.
And for our audience, we'd greatly appreciate a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. More reviews means we bubble up higher in iTunes, etc. So more business owners looking for podcast help with their growth will find us.